Hi, this is Robert with Cruzbike, and today we're going to adjust the Tektro brake levers on the Q45. They are different than our normal spec, and they have two adjustments for the cable pull through a knob here at the front. Some of these levers are threaded, at which point you turn it clockwise and you're set. Others have a cam system, which you can see here. The cam system ones have to be adjusted so that the cable is pulling on the inside notch, not on the outside notch. Here we can see a close-up of the cam with the cable on the inside. That's the proper position. When you set up your Q45, it might be possible that the cam was set up on the inside position as shown in this photo, but if the cam is on the outside as shown in this photo, that is the incorrect position and your braking performance will suffer. We want the cable to be pulling from the inside cam. Adjustment, we're going to use a number 5 Allen to loosen the cable at the caliper. We have to take the cable out of the lever in order to change the cam position. So once we have our cable loose, we're going to look and see if your cable is pulling from the outside cam as shown here. You want to remove the cable head, and then we want to turn the knob so we have the flat section available to us to move the cam over to the inner position. Then we'll rotate the knob back around to lock the cam in place. Once we've locked the cam down, we can find our cable again, reroute that cable head into the lever, make sure all of our housings are seated, and we can reattach the cable at the caliper. Now let's do some fine-tuning of our brakes. For that we're going to need a 3mm Allen, also a 4mm Allen. Note you can adjust the depth of the pads using a 3mm Allen on the caliper as shown here. Both sides of the pads adjust independently of each other, so you can really fine-tune the reach of the pads. Good braking is achieved with a balance between the amount of cable pull and the depth of the pads. Using a 4mm Allen, we can loosen the adjuster mounts on the frame itself to center the caliper over the rotor. Another thing it's important to note is checking the rotor itself to make sure that there's no warpage. It's not uncommon to try to balance your caliper using the adjustments, but you get some rubbing, sometimes because the rotor has a slight warp in it. It is not uncommon for a rotor to have a little bit of a warp in it, either from the factory or just from shipping. This is easily fixed either by using a rotor straightening tool like I have here, or a crescent wrench. Squish down onto the rotor and then tweak it just a little bit to remove the warp. It's very important though that you do not touch the rotor with your hands. You don't want to use your hands to make this adjustment because it's sharp, and also the oils from your skin will contaminate the rotor. Once you've made sure your rotor is nice and straight, it'll be much easier to center the caliper over the rotor and make sure you have a good amount of pad using the pad adjustment screws. It's also important to note that on the pad adjustment screws, it's always a good idea to use the flat side of the Allen wrench, not the round ball end, as those screws can sometimes be pretty tight and you don't want to strip them out. Once everything's centered, lock down the caliper, make sure your cable is nice and tight. That's the last step. We want to make sure we have a little bit of a preload on the lever. Before we tighten that down, we're going to give it a little preload here. Tighten that down. You'll have roughly about an inch of cable between the cable exit and the start of the lever arm. As always, check your lever action and adjust as necessary. And before you go for a ride, make sure everything's nice and secure. As always, if you have questions, it's always good to follow up with your local bike shop if you have one for adjustments like these if you're unsure, or send us an email at support@cruzbike.com. Thanks.